first to make some general comments about the report. I'd ask that they stay away from any specific recommendations at that point. What I'm looking for is some general comments. Then when that's over, I will go through the report broken down into sections, similar to the way we do the work plan, and look for comments from everybody. I'm going to suggest a couple of groupings because, for instance, 4 and 6 are both on building fees, so I'll suggest we do those together. And I'll go over this again when we come to it. 5, 20, 21, and 22 are all about our IT platform. And 10, 11, 12, and 13 are all about customer service. So it might behoove us to deal with those as a group. So I'm going to go through it, each section with the council to speak to it. And if you have, what I really would like you to do is, if you agree with this, because the staff have made recommendations in each one of these sections. If you agree with the staff recommendation, please indicate that. If you'd like to see it amended, please indicate that. If you would like to see something in its place, please indicate that as well. What I'm going to do is keep track of what all councillors say in terms of what they would like to see as direction under those various sections. I have my pad here. I'm very hopeful that I'll be able to read my own writing. When we've gone through that process, I'll then engage everybody in a general discussion to make sure that those directions are what council wants. I'm going to be a little bit informal through that process, a little bit of going back and forth as we try to craft what it is we want to direct staff on. Then hopefully we can have a motion on that, and we will move forward. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, through you. Because there's 25 recommendations, I don't know if we wait till the very end to try and formulate what we want to say is going to be easy to keep track of. And I'm suggesting that maybe we vote on each recommendation as we deal with it.
Well, the only reason I don't want to do it that way is because some of these recommendations are interrelated, and a conversation that's completed in one can be infected by something that we do later on. I don't mind saying this is what we've agreed to after the end of each one, but I would prefer to vote at the end. But I'll ask my colleagues. I'm at your direction.
I think if we're going to intertwine them, then yes. But if we're not, then
yeah. I'm happy to do it whatever way you want.
I didn't realize we were going to intertwine them. So.
Well, I'm not saying that they're intertwined, but I'm just saying a conversation about one has an impact on another, budget being the example. But I'm happy to do it one by one.
I can go either way.
Okay. Donna?
I would prefer to do it so the first recommendation has 3 parts. In my mind, it seems like it would be easier, but maybe in the end, I would be okay with waiting until the end, as long as you keep really good notes.
We'll do it. With that prohibition, we'll do it one at a time. Okay, so we're going to start off then first with general comments. I'm going to lead off, and then I'm going to turn it over to each one of you to make some opening comments. These opening comments are meant to be general in nature. Then we'll get into the individual parts. So as I said, I wanted to thank staff as well as everybody else who've been involved. In my view, the report made recommendations and modifications in 5 key areas. It talked about fee modernization and cost recovery, essentially more effective use of the reserves that we have, particularly in our building department. Second of all, there's a number of suggestions that enhance and improve business practices. And a really good example of that is moving from a sequential to a concurrent approach on some of our planning and building matters. The third one, broad area, is an investment in staff. It's about expanding the amount of personnel that we use in our, particularly in our planning process, and reorganizing that staff to better meet client needs. The fourth area is providing enhanced tools. And the biggest one is about using IT to enhance customer service and provide better monitoring of our performance. And finally, it's about fostering a customer service culture. The way I like to say it is an attempt where we strive to say yes, even though we know from time to time the answer has to be no. I believe that action is required in all of these areas. And although we do many things well, there is always room for improvement. And the 5 areas highlighted provide a good focus for that improvement. Some of the information provided in the report to me is a little bit disappointing, particularly as it relates to the building and planning IT tracking system and public portal. I believe council has been clear that a system to automate the planning and building process was a priority. It's unfortunate that this has not occurred yet. And to me, it is critical that it be a priority focus going forward. There is no doubt that there are reasons why we've been delayed. However, the bottom line is clear. We need to get this done, and we need to get it done quickly. The consultant's recommendations in some respects represents fundamental change. A process that is neither easy nor comfortable, but necessary. Finding new ways to do something is not and should not be seen as an indictment of staff efforts or competencies, but as a desire to seek improved ways to serve our population. My second general concern is that in some cases, the staff report pushes out implementation beyond what I would like to see. I believe we need to get on with things sooner rather than later, particularly when it comes to staffing up and organizing workflows in the building and planning department. And finally, and I will adhere to my own rules, I think that we as a council need to implement a follow-up process to ensure that these recommendations are being carried out in a timely manner. And I will make some specific recommendations in regards to that later in the meeting. So those are my opening comments, and I turn it over to the Deputy Mayor for hers.
Thank you through you. Council unanimously endorsed the recommendations in the building and planning review. And I thank staff as well for weighing in, and I look forward to what my colleagues have to say going forward. COVID-19 does play a part in some of the recommendations, reverting to touchless, paperless activities that would be provided by the new building and planning software. We did alert staff at the beginning of the term, as you might remember, that we were looking for a portal for applicants so applicants could do business online. And we even suggested the Kingston model. We are going to be dealing with something different, but at the end of the day, it will provide efficiency both for our staff and our applicants. And I'll speak more about that when we dive into the report. As there are 25 recommendations, I've suggested to Janice she have a look at the dashboard used by the CAO of the county when they're dealing with their service delivery review, which is along the same lines. There's a bunch of recommendations. And what the dashboard does is give you a one-page report as to where we're at and how long it appears that it will take to get it finished. I think that that would be a good way to show council quickly all the detail on one page as to the status of the recommendations that are being made today and on a monthly basis to track the progress. If we wait for the, what are those things called? The work plan. Thank you very much, Councillor Valentine. That's on a quarterly basis, and I think we need to see it a little more quickly than that. So my comments echo the mayor's. Let's get to it. And these are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Donna?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to staff for all this hard work and for allowing us to get to this point today. I believe that this was the main focus for this council term. It was my main focus anyway, and I'm sure that others shared it as well, because we were hearing a lot of concerns about the processes that had to be followed and people not understanding things in our building and planning. So in the latter part of the last term of council, we started with the Economic Development Committee, and that helped us to get to the point where we are today. I believe that we should accomplish the recommendations or the action items that we endorse or ask to be put forward before the end of this term, because in my mind, it was a promise that was made to our constituents. It came through loud and clear to me while I was campaigning that there were concerns with people with official plan amendments, minor variances, building permits, building inspections. And it wasn't necessarily staff's fault. It was just that things were not organized to educate the minds of people that don't talk that language every day. And I believe if we do implement many of these recommendations, that it should be much easier for our staff and much easier for our residents to go through these different processes. And above all, I know this is pointing to a very specific recommendation. We need to get a staff person to support building and planning immediately.
Thank you, Donna. Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo my colleagues so far with regards to thanking the staff, the committee, the consultants, and also those who took time to participate in this survey. I find it to be a very fulsome report with, although with some really ambitious plans, but overall I find it to be a good report with some good ideas. We are currently in the midst of a pandemic, so there's been challenges since March regarding that. And then every time the province turns around and has new regulations put forward, our staff really have to keep on top of things. So I'm very proud of our staff for the work they've done during the pandemic and also as we move forward with new regulations.
Councillor Herron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too echo the mayor's comments that it's not an indictment of staff. It's taking a good hard look at yourself. I too went through a consulting thing last year, brought my own guy in, and yeah, you see the warts, but you also see what you're doing well. And I think that's important. And no one likes change, but the change that could come through as of today should make the jobs easier for the people and our customer service abilities better. Change is never good, or people don't like change, I should say, but this is going to be a good change, I think. I feel for the building department being short-staffed for a chunk of it, and a lot of it falling on our building officials, chief building officials' desk a lot of the time, and I think we need to alleviate that, and I think this report helps. Other than tax revenue, this is our biggest income earner for the township. So we need to make it customer friendly. We need the customer service to be there, and we need it to be as streamlined as possible. And the only way to do it is through these recommendations today. So I'm hoping that we can get some stuff done and make our CBO's job a little bit easier after it gets a little bit harder, and then it should be easier.
Thank you, Jerry. Just before we get into the individual sections, I'm going to ask Janice or Rob, I don't know which one, if they want to make any general comments about the report.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I'm not sure I'm going to add a lot. I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank a few people. Janice played a large role in supporting the development of the report, and I just wanted to thank her for the support she provided. Jeanette, of course, also provided her input as it relates to planning-related matters, and she's always there to help with formatting and grammar and stuff. So I'd like to thank them all. So just as a general note and an observation, I guess, from my perspective, there's no aversion to change coming from me, right? I recognize that I'm not here forever. And I think the tone and the caution that I tried to incorporate, I guess, in the report is that we're trying to put together a comprehensive response that's going to try to incorporate all of the different components of what's about to happen in the next very short period, right? I mean, to be honest, I'm fairly close to retirement, so I want to make sure that the department is set up properly right before I leave. And that means understanding exactly what needs to be done from the entirety of what we deliver in terms of services. We do bylaw enforcement, we do building, we do planning. And there's no question that we're doing that with too few people, right? So what happens when I leave? How does my position get replaced? And so the notion of, say, bringing on an individual, as has been recommended by Performance Concepts, it's obviously required, but what should that position be given the relatively near-term significant changes that might happen in the department? So we're trying to take a comprehensive approach, I guess, in how we want to make those decisions. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there as part of why we're saying, let's not go too quickly. We have to move forward. We have to get these things done. But there's some underlying other aspects, I guess, that we want to make sure are considered as part of the debate. So that's as much as I want to add at this point. Of course, I'm here to answer any questions, and we'll get into more detail as we go. But I did want to thank a few people that supported me and provide you with a bit of additional context.
Thank you very much, Rob. Did you want to add anything to that, Janice?
Sorry, I can make now. No, not a whole lot. I think as we go through each one, we can talk about timing. I think for sure we've accelerated some of the timing from what was recommended by Performance Concepts. I think other areas we're kind of on target. I don't think there's anything that's behind what they recommended, and certainly when we're talking about the staffing item and the organizational structure review, that's on our work plan for 2020. So that was the full intention all along, to take recommendations out of this plan, incorporate them into that project, and bring that forward for council. So sure, there's still a lot of work to do because there wasn't a lot of specifics in here other than the one position. So we've got some work ahead of us to do that, but certainly that is a focus for us. And the IT solution is certainly a focus as well. I think just as we were getting through into the implementation of that, we identified some weaknesses, quickly identified another opportunity that could, again, still be implemented very quickly and probably proceed in 2020 if we can get the integration piece worked out, that will improve the efficiency for the building department as opposed to what the tool was that was recommended, because this other one just hadn't been identified through this report. So yeah, for sure. I think as we go through each item, we can have more conversation around that.
Thank you, Janice. So let's get into it, colleagues. The first part of this is recommendations 1, 2, and 3. They deal primarily with development fees. I'm not going to go through the recommendations made by the consultants. We've all read them. In the staff report, staff have made 3 recommendations for implementation in this section. 1, that there be no increase in planning application fees included in the 2021 budget. 2, that council provide direction with respect to Performance Concepts recommendation to increase the planning application fees to achieve an overall cost recovery target of 66%. And 3rd, that staff undertake the required analysis and provide a report for council considerations in Q3 2021, outlining the required increase in fees to meet the target established by council, with implementation of a new fee schedule to begin in 2022 with a minimum 3-year phase-in period. And I'll start with the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So the consultants stated the current Selwyn planning fee recoveries are slightly above our peers and neighbor averages, but below growth municipality levels in the province. We cover slightly more billable hours of work than our peers / neighbors as well. So we do want to remain competitive. I agree with the freeze in fees for 2021. And I want to add that there might be a possible freeze in 2022, depending on what happens with COVID and how it all plays out. We don't know what's going to happen. And so I want to keep that in the background. And I agree, receive a report with phase in over 4 years rather than 3, and a report due in Q3 of 2021 with recommendations and with local comparators. And the local comparators I would use would be the city, Cavan Monaghan, and Otonabee South Monaghan, because as I said before, we want to remain competitive. And council may decide not to go forward with it once we get all those numbers. So you were looking for a direction from council, and that's my feeling on that those particular 3 recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anita?
I agree with holding it at the current fee at the present time. I know that we are competitive throughout the township or throughout the county, and perhaps also with our comparators. And I think as well that when we might only be at a certain percentage of cost recovery, but we're also allowing the development of industrial, commercial, residential, which also helps with the bottom line for the tax base.
Thank you. Jerry?
I'm not a big fan of the 76%, or sorry, 66%. Because, and I do, as the deputy mayor pointed out, where do we stand against the others in the county? And we do have the lowest tax rate, so I'm wondering why we can't just have the gentle bumps that we've been having along the way rather than 66. We need development and not more costs, and I get it, we're trying to recoup our original investment, but almost like a lost leader at a grocery store, once you got these people as a customer, you've got them. So the milk's in the back corner, so you got to walk by and pick up everything else. We've got them as a customer for life. We've got the tax revenue coming in for life. So we don't necessarily, in my opinion, need to recoup everything at once. We can eat a little bit of that cost and have it returned to us down the road.
Thank you, Jerry. Donna?
Yes, thank you. Through you, I didn't really realize until I started reading this that ratepayers were paying part of the growth. So I think that really we should be looking to take more of that away from the regular ratepayer and have growth pay for growth. I still believe that somehow we have to be competitive with our neighbors as well. So it's a bit of a slippery slope, but that was just one concern I had there.
Okay. Jerry, did you want to add something?
If I could, through you to Councillor Valentine. So then on the other side of that coin, should the minor hockey or users of the arenas pick up the deficit, or should all the township help pick up the deficit at the arenas and the libraries?
I think we do. I think we do that, don't we? As
So
well.
what I'm saying though, if we don't want the taxpayers, the general taxpayers to help offset the costs of the development fees, the same could be said for libraries and
Well, and
arenas too, right?
well,
Yeah,
and
that's
that's
true.
that's the fundamental issue on everything we do. How much is charged to the specific user, and how much of what we do is charged to the general tax base. But I just gonna for mine is and ask Robert a question. So generally speaking, to Donna's point, growth pays for growth. That's what you try to do in the planning world, is that growth pays for growth. And that's what development fees are all about. So if you're required to make a new investment because of an increase in population or because somebody is doing something, generally you try to charge that capital out to the person who's creating the growth. And is that I know that's a layman's way of, I'm sure planners have a much more technical way of saying it.
Yeah, there's a, I guess what's being argued here is there, at a current rate, of course, there's not a straight line, 100% delineation, I guess, of the costs associated with delivering the service. So what we can say, though, is any of the extraneous costs, right, that we undertake in terms of peer review consultants or lawyers, that is definitely done at 100% at the cost of the applicant. But there are, I guess, costs associated. I guess what was found by the consultant is that there's a portion of primarily Jeanette and I's time that isn't getting completely funded by the developing industry.
And so and just to make sure that I understand it correctly, and to Jerry's point, this is not about raising additional revenue. What their proposal is saying that you would raise more of that revenue through a development fee and less of that revenue from your existing tax base. So if you ended up increasing, all other things being equal, if you ended up increasing your development fees, that should see an offsetting decrease in your levy. All other things being equal, right, which they never are, but all other things being equal, what the consultant is talking about is shifting the burden of cost away from the ratepayer and onto the developer. That's what his recommendation is. He's saying, I see it here. He says right now it's about 50-50 is what he's saying. And he's saying it should go 2/3, 1/3. I'm doing it roughly. I think I'm just trying to make sure I understand what his proposal is. Okay, good. So everybody wanted to intervene. I saw Sherry first and then Donna and then Jerry, and if Anita wants to.
Thank
So
you.
go ahead.
So it isn't just development fees, it's also all the planning application fees, and they would all go up exponentially. And I'm not saying that we not do it. What I suggested was that we get the report from Rob, as he suggested in his recommendation, but it would be based over 4 years and not 3 years, and that it would come into us in Q3 of 2021. There's not a rush now because we're putting a freeze on the fees for 2021. And then once we see what the recommendations are with the comparators, we make a decision then. I'm not saying that we don't do it. That was my recommendation. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, but no, and nothing what I said suggests anything different. I'm not saying that. I want folks to understand that an increase in development fees, if that's what you choose to do, should result in a decrease in the levy. That's the concept that I want to get clear. That if you're going to say that a larger percentage of the costs are borne by development fees, then you should have a smaller demand on the general levy. To Jerry's point about arenas, it's the same point. If you charge a higher user fee for the arena, then the general deficit that we fund out of general will become lower. It's in that sense, it's a zero. That's the only point that I was trying to make. I happen to agree with the points that you've made. Donna.
And I just wanted to say that when we compare building fees to what goes into or comes out of library budgets and the arenas, the recreation, we are mandated to provide those services to the community. So it's not really comparing apples to apples, but I do take your point. But it isn't really apples to apples comparison.
Okay, Jerry, sorry.
Yeah, I guess the only point I want to make now is just that as long as the recommendation says we have those comparators in there, because at the end of the day, we are in competition with everybody in the community. We'd slit each other's throats for a medium-sized density, commercial joint in here, you know what I mean? So as long as we've got those comparators, I'm good with it.
Good. So what I've noted here what I think there's a consensus on council is that everybody agrees that we should freeze the fees in 2021. I think everybody said that. I think Sherry suggested, I happen to agree with her. The rest of you haven't spoken about it, but if we do something, that it be phased in 4 years rather than 3 years. Everybody, I think, is comfortable with that. That part that we're all comfortable with a Q3 report, but that it needs to also include comparators. So it's not just, it's not, as I think Gary said, and Sherry said too, it's not just about what your actual amount may be. It's understanding that you're in a competitive environment and you need to understand what our competitors are charging. So that Q3 report that's spoken to is fine on that timing, but that specifically, and it may have been the plan to put it in there anyways, but council making it very clear they want comparators in that report. And this is all for implementation. So we'll get that as a council in the third quarter of Q3 of 2021 for implementation at the beginning of 2022, if we decide we're going to move, right? So is everybody comfortable with that? Okay, so you want to vote on that specifically. Okay, somebody want to move those? Sherry, Donna, all those in favor? So that's carried. And Madam Clerk, you have that motion? Good, thank you. Okay, we will move on to recommendations 4 and 6, which are specifically dealing with building permit fees. And let's see here, why don't we start with Donna this time?
Okay, thank you very much. I totally agree with the recommendation. I always found it very confusing to charge a certain fee per $1,000 worth of the value. And one thing that I just wanted to question, it's sort of a moot point now if we're going to change away from it, but if a construction or a house or whatever was going to cost $20,100, would we be charging $22,000? Like that's, I know a house would cost more than that, but I'm just using those numbers. Would we bump it up to the 22, or would we take it back to the 21? How did that work, Rob?
We'd use the fraction, right? So that would be 20.1 times $14.
So we'd make it into a fraction.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if it was 25, 0.5,
Yep.
we'd do it. Okay.
That's how we would do it. Yeah.
So the other question is, in the report, they talked about square foot or square meter. Is there any difference in the calculation if you do it by square foot or square meter, or does it pretty much work out to be the same?
Well, we would make it work out to be the same. Yeah. So in essence, I think what we would do for the general public is provide them with the rate for each particular metric, right? So, yeah. So if they provided us with the square footage of their house in metric, then we could do the math using the per square meter. And as most of the applications would come in imperial, and so we'll have a rate for the imperial, and they'll be the same.
Okay. Yeah. That's just what I didn't really understand, and those are my concerns there.
Okay,
But otherwise, I fully support changing to that system.
to a square
Yeah.
meter stroke foot
Yeah.
system. Okay, Jerry.
Yeah, I'm all for the, pardon me, the square foot, square meter, whatever you want to call it at this point, and the freeze. I've always thought it was rather, if I owned a lumber yard and I was a carpenter, my cost for building would be a whole lot less than regular Joe. So we kind of, once you start figuring it out, I think that's the easiest way, and everybody knows clear across the board. Right now, lumber's up 30%. What's the cost on a permit? Is it up 30? Is it, so I think that's a lot easier.
Okay, Anita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also totally agree with this recommendation. I think it simplifies things tremendously. I remember back in the day when you had to figure out how much it would cost to build a house. And I know if it was a brick-sided house, it was so much per foot. And if it was a, aluminum-sided or whatever. So this having the pricing on per meter or per foot, I think it makes things a lot easier for the projects.
Okay, Sherry.
Thank you. So the report, is it saying, I believe we should freeze the building fees for 2021 through 2023. And that was consistent with the consultant's recommendations. Our fees are high in comparison to others. Is that what this is saying?
That's not what it says right now. Go
Well,
ahead.
so if we're going to change our fee schedule, we're not freezing fees because the fees are going to be different. So we can say we're going to freeze the fees as they are for 2021. And then the intention as recommended by Performance Concepts was that the new schedule would be revenue neutral. So although the fees would be different, we wouldn't be collecting any more money. So essentially
Additional.
we'd be collecting the same amount of money or as close as we can get. So if
So be
if the
like,
fee schedule was remaining the same, yes, your fees would be frozen until 2023, but we can't freeze a fee where the fee schedule is changing. So we're just acknowledging that we would freeze it for 2021. We do the work to figure out what a new revenue neutral fee schedule would be that would come into place in 2022. When we get some experience, we have to do that annual calculation to prove that we're collecting the amount, no more than the amount that covers our costs. And then, we kind of make sure that we hit the mark. And if it's too high, then we can lower it. If something changes and we're too low, then we can adjust it. But the goal is to be revenue neutrals. So
Okay,
okay, so it's almost like a freeze, but you call it something different.
it is because the fee schedule is going to change. So you can't freeze something that,
Okay,
is
so
gonna
the
change.
motion that we would say is that the fees are frozen for 2021 and that the fee schedule for 2022 and 2023 will be revenue neutral compared to 2021, right?
That's
Okay,
what
but
it
I have a
says.
question.
Yeah.
So what happens if when we go to square meter, there's a reduction?
Sorry. Yeah. So our goal would be to find a way to set those rates based on our previous year's experience, right? So I'll do some math and say, look, in 2019 and 2020, there was an average of 70 houses built, and they cost an average of X dollars.
Right.
What does that extrapolate to in terms of a square meter charge, right? And so we'll base it on our history and then we'll set it so that it's revenue neutral. So we're freezing our revenue essentially, right? That's really what we're doing. Yeah. And then of course there'll be some changes and we may not hit 70, we may hit 75, right? But our goal is to try to be neutral.
I understand. Okay, I like it.
It's a similar concept as to when we change assessment, but we don't change our tax revenue. We
Right.
just allocate it differently over the homes.
Yeah, and then going to the timeline, I agree with the recommendation that it be implemented by Q3 2021. Is that what,
Well, I think that's where there's a divergence.
okay,
Okay, and I'll speak to that as well when
Okay.
Terry's finished.
Oh, well, that was it.
Okay, I happen to agree with the deputy mayor. If we go, the proposal essentially, and I understand the concept, it's a lot easier if there's some logic to at a year end and whatever. The challenge is that's from when the consultant tabled this idea to when we would be implementing it would be 18 months. That seems like an awful long period of time. I tend to agree with the deputy mayor that is it not possible to get a report to council by the end of the first quarter of 2021 with what a new fees thing would look like and implement it effective July 1st, 2021. So we're asking, the deputy mayor, I believe, is asking that it be done 6 months sooner than what staff have suggested. I'm supportive of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether other councillors are, and Rob may want to speak to that, to that issue.
Yeah, I think when we were developing the timelines, we were kind of cognizant of what we thought would be priorities, right? So we've got a big chunk of work to do related to staff and the succession planning piece, and that's going to take an awful lot of time and consideration. And this is something that it's I understand it was a recommendation. It's advised or it's noted as a best practice. I'm all for that. It's just, I just didn't see it as pressing an issue as addressing kind of the fundamental, labor issues and the longer term, setting up of the department, right? So that's I think what drove the timing as it relates to this. It just was seen as being more of a nice to have than a
Need.
than a need. Yeah.
So I think we have, we're pretty much sold on the idea. It's the timing, right? So Sherry and I have a perspective on that. Rob has a perspective on that. Anita, Jerry, Donna, do you have a perspective on that?
Just that what Rob has just said with regards to, some of the challenges with regards to staffing and succession planning and all that sort of thing. I think it's, I think what I'm interpreting from Rob is that to get it like even 6 months sooner, it would be quite ambitious, taking all things into consideration.
Yes, Sherry.
So maybe we can compromise and say by Q4 2021 and could be implemented in 2022. Would that be fair? Rob?
I think that's essentially what we're recommending.
So
Is that we would bring a report.
So council you would bring a report so that council would approve the new model in September of 2021 for implementation on January 1st, 2022.
Yep.
Is that what I'm sorry?
Q4 is not September.
Yeah, this is the end of
October, November,
Q3
December.
as we
So
speak.
October 1st.
Yeah.
Oh, you want it at the beginning of Q4? Okay.
No,
You're
it
stipulating
doesn't,
that?
if you want to say Q4,
Yeah.
the challenge is if you bring the report in the last meeting of December for implementation on the 1st of January, you really haven't given any chance for the public to react to it. That's why I put sort of like that. Sorry, Janice, you have a comment.
Sorry, no, the report would be probably late in Q3 when the report would come back. And that would allow us time for kind of that
Okay,
public
so
process
it's Q3,
notification
yeah,
and then
so you're
implement
comfortable with that, right?
January.
Okay. Okay, so let me just read that back. Number one, we're going to freeze the fees for 2021. Everybody's on side with that. Good. The fees for 2022 and 2023 will be established in a manner that they are revenue neutral as compared to 2021. I think everybody's on side with that. 3, council wants us to go to a square meter / square foot model of calculating building fees. It would like a report in Q3 of 2021 on how that would be done for implementation on January 1st, 2022. Is that, colleagues? Okay. So who wants to move it this time? Anita will move it. Donna will second it. All those in favor? Carry. Great. Making great progress. Okay. So now, and I suggest that we do these together, but if you don't want to, you don't. So recommendation 5, 20, 21, and 22 all deal with the IT portal. Okay, so but I don't mind if the way the staff have done it, they did 5 separately and then 20, 21, and 22 separately. But let's just, so the issue before us, and let's just deal with 5 if that's what you want to do. I think 20, 21, 22, we'll get it covered in 5, but if we don't, we'll do it separately. So the issue here is 5. And in essence, this has to do with the portal. And it's, if I understand it correctly, staff have said the portal that we had been originally looking at doesn't work. We need to do a different solution. And I think that's what staff have said. If I'm not getting that right, tell me.
Yeah, so I guess the way I would phrase it is it just doesn't have complete functionality, right? So it does have the front facing, the applicant facing portal, and it does provide them with the applicants with some opportunity to make applications, but when you get to the business end of things, there's no, say, inspection tracking component to it. There are aspects of it that just were a bit too weak, right, from our perspective. So we wanted to look at something with a bit more functionality. And we're looking at a purposely built piece of software, and we've had 3 reviews of it to date. We're just ensuring, of course, that it can be integrated properly with the software that we've recently purchased, right? And it has much more functionality, both on the front-facing end. So applicants would have much more of an ability to track their applications. And I know that was something that council found to be of an absolute priority. In addition, they'll be able to make, not simply make application and understand where their application is in the queue, but also once their permit's issued, they'll be able to ask questions and to request inspections. And there's just a whole host of more functionality with this particular piece than there is with what comes with the software from Diamond.
Okay, I'm going to go to the council, and I'm
I have a
rotating. it.
question before
Okay,
we do that.
Okay. fair
So
enough.
through you, so this new software, would it be able to provide what the consultants had suggested that we would be good for council and for the public and for you, such as the KPIs, the key performance indicators?
Yeah, so there's so there is functionality that allows us to track, a variety of things, whatever we can set it to track, right? So if we, we need to account for the length of time it takes us to review an application, then that's part of what you can track. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to speak to this one first. So to me, and I think I think that probably all of our counselors, this is a critical piece of what we want to get done. And for 2 reasons. One, it provides our clients the ease of being able to deal in an online environment. And in today's world, and the COVID world even more so, the ability to be able to do all of these things on an online platform is preferable. It makes us competitive with other jurisdictions. It's a good practice to have. The second thing it does, and this is what I believe Sherry was speaking to, it allows us to be able to track on a granular basis our application. So it isn't just a matter of meeting the 108, Bill 108 timelines. It's an ability to see the application move through our internal process and be able to identify if there's a bottleneck in a particular area, if a particular item got waylaid, or even eventually to check if there's a systemic problem, because if it gets hung up always in the same point, then we've got some sort of idea that we've got a bottleneck there. So, and that's what we want. That's what we want to do. And I don't disagree. We want to do it right. The challenge I have, and is that I thought we were there. I thought we were going to be there by now. From the conversations that had happened, I thought we'd be here right now. That's my concern. So let me ask the question. When will an IT portal and tracking system on building and planning be in place? I know you can, I can't, to the best of your ability to estimate that.
Well, so I think we'll be prepared to bring up a report to council, right? Asking for your blessing to purchase this product. So it's a bit tough because we're kind of in the throes, but I would hope that so the last meeting in October, I'd like to be in a position to make a recommendation to council. And this is a purposely built cloud-based piece of software that it is fairly quick to implement. It's not something that would take a protracted period to get online. So the hope there would be that before the end of the year, we'd have something that is completely functional, right? That's the goal, right? So,
Okay, that's reasonable. And one other question, and I'll turn it over to my counselors, and this is probably to Lane. The modernization money that we had targeted for this system, that's still available to fund this new program that you're looking at?
Yeah, we don't have the final cost yet, right? So we're not sure about that. The recommendation from the consultants actually that we take it out of the reserve too, right? So
Well, that was the recommendation, but you came back, I think, and said, no, I can get it out of modernization funds.
the original recommendation of what we were going to implement would have come from the modernization money. So until we have this report in October, I can't say that for sure.
So modernization money, if it's there, and if it isn't, then the reserves in the building department.
That's correct.
So we'll have money to pay for it one way or the other. Okay. Who did I go for? Who goes? Jerry, you should go first. No, Jerry.
Well, I think the biggest thing on this is the fact that we're getting a report in October and good to go by January kind of solves any sort of question or issue now. So good work.
Okay. Donna?
Yes, through you to Rob. So Rob, do you know other municipalities that have used this software that you have in mind?
Yeah, it's being used in 30 municipalities to date. Locally, it's currently in place in North Kawartha, and they're just they're just coming to terms with Kevin Monaghan to supply them as well. And that's again one of the other benefits is that because it's cloud-based, if you're a builder in the county of Peterborough and you have occasion to do work in Kevin Monaghan and in Selwyn, you'll be able to track all your applications on your same account, right? So these are the kind of benefits that we're seeing. And this is because it's purposely built. They've thought of everything, and then they've been in the business long enough to anticipate a lot of the questions that come from being in that very focused part of the industry, right? So it's a compelling piece of software that we're excited about. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sherry?
Thank you, through you. I could rant on this and I'm not going to. Can you tell us what the name of it is?
It's Cloud Permit.
Cloud Permit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Formerly eVolta was the name. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
It was formerly eVolta.
Evil.
That was
Oh, yeah.
their
Okay.
original. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There's another municipality that's probably looking at it too. I think Drogheda. Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that now we're mired in COVID-19, as I mentioned before. We need to move forward to paperless, touchless, or contactless processes and services. So it is important to bring it online as soon as possible. And being able to access information remotely in one place has never been more important. This is something that's going to make staff's life easier, the applicant's life easier, and be able to bring reports to council in a timely fashion. So my recommendation was going to be that we have it operational by the end of 2020. And is that possible?
That's what we're trying to achieve as well. Yeah. So we're in the midst
Put
of
that in a motion.
yeah. So we're in the midst of course, currently a pretty massive software upgrade, right? So we have to integrate this with that. So that's a bit of a challenge. And I guess to your point, Madam, we have done an awful lot in terms of what COVID has made us do, of course, is to be more responsive from a acceptance of applications electronically. So we do accept the majority of applications now electronically. It's a bit more cumbersome than what we're hoping to achieve with this piece of software, but we are doing it electronically. In addition, we've got a large scale copier that we use that is also helping with productivity, right? So there have been some changes that we've made. We've got, we do our reviews electronically now using Bluebeam. So yeah, so we're really set up for the next step, which is bringing on this piece of software. So I didn't want you to think that, we haven't been responsive, I guess, to the needs that have been brought on by COVID and being much more tied to, electronic means of communication, right?
Thank you, Rob. Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Janice might have answered this question sort of earlier, but is there a reason that the consultants are so into this Diamond software because they've mentioned it throughout the report a number of times. And yet now this cloud permit, I'm just wondering if the consultants had actually looked into cloud permit as opposed to Diamond, or were they just really, focused solely on Diamond software?
If I could, I believe the Diamond software was something that had come forward for the broader IT conversion. And the reason why they focused on that is because we were using that platform for a broader conversion for accounting and I think some customer service modules. Janice? You want
Yeah,
to-
and that's correct. They did evaluate a number of other software platforms, but cloud permitting was not one that they brought forward for evaluation. So it's one that Robert identified.
Okay. So the resolution is that staff return to council by the end of October with a specific recommendation for an IT platform and portal for building and planning, and that it include a process or a timeline that would see implementation by January 1st of 2021. Is that where we're at? So we get a report on what it looks like in October, and it goes live on January 1st, 2021, or sooner. So we can say by January 1st, 2021. Is that, I think that's the consensus of council. I think, Rob, that's what you're saying you're shooting for. Now, it's, things can happen, but that's what we're shooting for.
That's right. Yeah. So just to give council a sense of what we've been doing in the background, we've had a couple of meetings with our IT people. And I'm not sure they're completely convinced yet that all this can be integrated. But I'm reasonably certain. I mean, I have to be, completely honest, but I think that the response from Cloud Permit have been satisfactory. They've worked with the Diamond background software with other municipalities. So we're at the final touches, I guess, of just establishing unequivocally, right, that this thing is going to work. So my goal is that we'll have that answer within the next few days, that I'll be able to provide you with a report at the end of October that tells you one way or another what we're doing from a software perspective.
Okay. Donna, do you have a follow-up comment?
I just had a question. I was just wondering if you knew, Rob, if this cloud permit for building and planning is the same company or the same concept as the cloud library that we've converted to.
I don't think so, no, because this particular company is kind of focused on building and planning software. And I think, the cloud is kind of a larger concept, right? It simply means that the data is stored at a large server farm, in this context in Canada. We made sure of that. And that it's not housed here, right? So people can access it from anywhere, essentially.
Thank you.
So we have that. Just a couple of comments. So I'm glad, staff and Rob, that you're responsive to the fact that this is a big priority for council. So it really is. If I could suggest, if you find in the next 2 or 3 days that your plans have gone awry, because it sounds like you have a decision point in the not too distant future, maybe you could let us know that something's gone awry and you're going to have an issue, right? Rather than just wait till the end of October and say, oh, by the way.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got that one. I need a motion. Somebody want to move that? Jerry will move that. Donna will second that. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we are on to staffing in the building and planning department. That's recommendations 7, 8, and 9. So I will turn it over to Sherry first. Oh, if I can give it to somebody else first. Okay, Anita, can you start off?
I really only had one question. That was with point number 8. They talk about the new position should be multidisciplinary. And so my question is, what is the likelihood of finding an individual with this suite of experience or credentials?
Yeah, and I think even performance concepts recognize that, we would have to find somebody with the correct background in one of the two disciplines, and their suggestion is that that person should come with a planning background, and that they would be trained to cover other aspects of what we deliver in terms of the building end of things, right? So, yeah, so the notion of finding that person out of the box it's pretty much a unicorn. So, yeah, so so we'll have to do something a bit different, right? But in the end, I think I certainly don't disagree with the notion that we need another person, right? And that the planning department does need some additional support. So, but again, as the point I was making a bit earlier was that we just wanted to make sure that we had a really good understanding of the big picture before we started making, smaller or more granular decisions, right? In terms of how the entire department's going to be set up.
And I'm going to call on Sherry in a second, but to that point, and here's the challenge from my perspective, because there's great validity to what you say, but it's a balancing act, because what you can do is keep looking for the most comprehensive and best solution, and keep saying, well, in 2 months I'll have some more data, and in 2 months after that I'll have some more data, and in 2 months after that I'll have something else that I know. And before you know it, you've another year has gone by before you've taken the action. So there's no question, on the one hand, having a comprehensive and informed process is ideal, but at some point you just need to trigger it and get a new staffer in there. And I just think we need to find the right balance there. I don't want us to go so fast that we do it terribly wrong. But on the other hand, I don't want us to take so much time that we've allowed what everybody in this room agrees is a shortage of staffing to be able to prevail. That's the challenge, is to find that sweet spot, so to speak, that we can hit it. Anyway, Sherry.
Thank you. Through you. I feel that the new position is really important because it's going to, because this person's experience, they'll take some of the load off the planner and for our building and planning manager, and be there to assist if there's any extended leave in the department going forward. We experienced that for a little while already, and it would have been a lot easier for Rob if there had been somebody there to pick up the slack. So I also point to, I don't know if you have the report that we received from the consultants, but 4.3 of that report, it talks about application intake efficiencies at the counter, and this particular person would be able to help, first of all, with the public, and it would take a lot of the heat off the planner in having to answer questions, because that person's the only one there that can answer them. So I believe, and we also, bylaw enforcement was mentioned, and I think we have third-party bylaw enforcement, which seems to be working right now. So I would suggest we continue that. I'm all for going for this person as soon as possible, that we start recruiting them, and we have the job description with the skills listed in the report from the consultant. I don't have a timeline for it. I'm not quite sure, when's the best time, but I'm just here to say that I want to help this department, and I think that's one way we can do it effectively and efficiently. Thank you.
Jerry, then Donna, then Anita.
Thank you. Through you. I too want to see this position filled sooner rather than later. I also like to have timelines down on these recommendations. So I'd throw out Q2, knowing that it might not happen, but at least there's something on there. Yeah. No, for them to be in place. Yeah. Is it? Yeah, Q1 then. All right. So we've had other people leave us to, sure. We've had other people leave us to become building officials, I believe, in other townships. Is there a hybrid there that might be able to come back home to roost, if you will, who's been there, got some training, got some experience, and may be able to come back? To try and develop this position, to me, is unacceptable. We need somebody now. And it's too important for us to drag our feet. It's going to make Rob's job easier, and it's going to make for better customer service. Can we get a hybrid model, if you will? Somebody strong in planning with a little bit or half-ass knowledge on planning, or vice versa, to try and help us out, rather than the perfect storm that the town, or that the consultant? Yes, the word I'm looking for. The consultant has recommended, right? So I think we just need to think outside the box just to make your job easier. They do, as Sherry mentioned, they do talk about the bylaw items, just chuck them all to our third party. I mean, let's just take the low hanging fruit and get rid of it. Let these guys do what they're supposed to be doing, instead of wasting time on people not cutting their grass.
Okay, so I think there was a question in there as well to you, Rob, was, is there a resource out there that we're familiar with that would be easy to bring in?
Not that I can think of at this point. If there was such an animal, I think I would have tried to, convince them to consider us. But I guess the only point I'd want to make about the bylaw enforcement and of things is I don't disagree that when it comes to the bread and butter complaints that we receive, the third party provider that we have is doing a really good job. I'm happy with his responses. He's good at dealing with the public, and for the the day-to-day complaints that we receive, he's good at getting compliance. I guess what I'm advocating for is that we have been essentially just a reactionary department, right? So we just don't have anybody to do things in a proactive way, right? And there are aspects of what I'm hearing from the general public is that they would, I think, maybe want to see a department that would be more proactive, right, in finding problems before they become large problems, and to develop policies and bylaws that are more intuitive and maybe address issues before they become problems. And we're just not in a position to do that, right? And so that's part of the overall objective of this review is to put some thought into asking council, obviously, if they're of the same mind, that maybe we could do things more proactively and not get away from reacting to issues, obviously, but maybe anticipating things a bit better, and developing stronger policies, and being in a position to for the tougher complaints that we receive that essentially end up on my desk, and there's a number of them. If we had somebody that was properly trained and understood how to deal with people correctly, and develop policies that I guess we could do a better job, ultimately, right, in dealing with something that has been not an afterthought, but essentially just a reactive department. So I think that's where I'm coming from when I'm thinking about the bigger picture.
Okay, thanks for explaining that, Rob.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify where we're talking about needing to look at the bylaw enforcement. Rob is bang on part of it. We're not saying that we would no longer use the contracted bylaw enforcement for the simple matters. But the fact of the matter is the amount of time that Robert is spending trying to manage some of the more complicated ones, some of the issues that come to council, it's a huge amount of time. And that cannot be just passed down to our contracted service. That just wouldn't work. So it's that side of it that we're really trying to look at. And when you look at the department overall, and we're talking about looking at the organizational structure in terms of the leadership of the department, and there's options to look at there, and performance concepts noted a couple of them. Are you going to have a chief building, like the main knowledge, I guess, would be your chief building official, or would it be a planner? So depending on which way we go there, and there wasn't a lot of guidance in the report, that really speaks a little bit to what do you need this other position to do? Because if that winds up being a professional planner, then you have more planning expertise there that would support the planner So that speaks to what this other new position is going to do, right? And we can't lose sight of the fact that we can't give up a lot of building expertise for planning expertise without replacing that building expertise. So it's finding that balance. And I think we need to consider all of those factors right from the leadership down to figure out what's the appropriate mix of duties from the top down in the department.
I'm going to come back to that point, but Donna? And then-
Yes, I'm not sure if I get most of these complaints or not, but I know that I've put a lot of these issues on Rob's desk even this summer. A lot that have been long-standing problems and have gone on for years and years. And I really agree that we do need somebody other than Rob to be proactive, because he just seems to be basically has to run around like a chicken with his head cut off, because he has so many issues to deal with, plus these bylaw enforcement issues. And it almost comes, people say to me, well, why do you have a bylaw if you can't enforce it? So it is very important, I think, that we do have somebody dedicated to that aspect. That's my one rant. My other one I know is a bit sensitive, and it's going back to the other position, the person at the counter that we've talked about. And we have in the past had a person at the counter, and I just wondered what the status is of that position, because there is only a temporary person there now. And I know that you can't really talk about personnel in a public forum, but just in generalities, will that person be back in that position? Or I don't know how you would answer that question.
Yeah, that's kind of hard to do. And
Yeah.
you know, I think what the question is that you continue to have flexibility in that positions are filled currently on an acting basis as opposed to a permanent basis. That would be a fair thing to say.
It is for sure right now. And what we want to do is look at the department as a total and figure out what the appropriate positions for the department are.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a good approach. It'll just take longer than we had hoped, but there are several issues there and several skill sets that you'll want to think about. I understand that. So I think I would agree with your recommendation there.
Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendation as written, I find that is not overly concrete. However, I do agree with the fact about the organizational review. And I'm just wondering if we could have a staff report as soon as reasonably possible, so we could find out when we could begin to actively begin a recruitment process for this position.
Yeah, so this project is on the 2020 work plan. So obviously we've had some other priorities, so it's been delayed, but my hope is to get some really good progress on this by the end of the year.
Jerry?
I'm just gonna throw this out like a grenade. What if we hired one of each? Do we have enough workload for somebody with building experience, and do we have enough workload for somebody in planning? Do we need two people? One is an underling for both. Helps with succession, helps take the workload off. Throwing that out there. And Lord knows, I am not for hiring more staff, so believe me, you work them good.
I think Janice wants to comment on
Yeah, and I think that it's those ideas and the development of what we need for all the different service areas in the department that we need to do that fulsome look at and figure out if maybe there is another position that's required to support building bylaw, but we need to do that review and come back to you and say, yep, the one position is good and this is how we're going to structure the department, or we're going to structure the department this way and this is what we need. So all options would be open, Jerry.
Do you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Take it through you to Janice then, I guess, and Rob. So through all your talks of this and trying to figure out everything, you guys can't sort of indicate today that, you know what, there is a need for 1-in-1? Through all the work that's gone into, this report, all the work into the succession plan and all the work into trying to fill voids, trying to get through the building process. We can't say that, you know what, there's a chance that we do need one for each.
Well, there's a chance. I think that may be the outcome. I don't know exactly, Jerry. I think the point that I'm trying to make is I'm really appreciative, right, that you're thinking of me. And I know that's genuine and that you're saying, look, Robert's doing, work because there's been, but it's not going to be Robert's problem for much longer. Right? So now that's the point I'm trying to make. It's going to be Janice's problem, right? And I have way too much respect for Janice than to drop something like that on her, right? So my goal ultimately is to make sure that before I leave, and it's not imminent, I don't give you that impression, before I leave, that the department is set up properly, right? That we're accounting for my law enforcement, for planning, for building, and that my staff, who I have an awful lot of respect for as well, are properly addressed as well, and that they have peers and a process that works well for them, right? So I'm asking for a bit of patience, right? But you need to know that we're cognizant that, that there's a need for some additional staff, and that we need to make some improvements from a productivity perspective, and all that's on the table. And I think I have a very good understanding of what council's goals are and their direction are, and that's what we're going to use to guide our decisions moving forward, right?
Donna wants to intervene, but before you do that, I was going to take a turn to intervene here. So to me, we've got a consensus for the end goal, right? Everybody understands we need more human resources in the department. So there's a commonality there. The challenge we have is that we also believe that we're likely needing to change the way we've organized the department. It's not just add on a body and you're done. We're worried that we're going to need to reorganize as well. So that complicates it. But here's the challenge from, I think, council's perspective. If you end up taking every day that we take, and we're going to have to take some days, but every day that we take, delaying a hire because we want to make sure that we've got the right organization, is a day that Robert, you're overtaxed, and that our customer service level isn't at the extent that we all want it to be, because we don't have enough resources. And we've got to find a way to get through the organizational thought process, and so that we can hire the staff. And you've got one of two ways you can do it. You can accelerate your review of the organization and get it done rather quickly. It's not an easy thing to do, but get it done rather quickly so you can do the hiring. Or you say, I'm going to go with a second best solution. I'm going to bring on a body knowing full well that the way I deploy them on day one may not be the way I deploy them on day 120, right? Because I know I'm going to have to make a change. So I'm going to bring somebody on right away because I got volumes, but how they're going to fit into the organization, I'll accept, may need to be changed. I know that's not the ideal. The ideal is you would have the organization done first. But we face a human resource shortage of bodies. And so I just thinking that we need, in this particular case, it's a suggestion, and I'm going to ask Janice and Bob to speak to that. But I really think we've got to get a resource in there sooner than later. And I'm just reaching for a way to do it. Janice, did you want?
Yeah, so I think in order to fill a full-time, long-term position, you need to know what the position's going to do. When we hire somebody, we're making a commitment to them. This is going to be your job, right? So we couldn't change that 2 or 3 months in. If there is a desire to provide an immediate resource, then the additional resource, then you would have to do that through some sort of a contract. Again, that's going to be a harder position to fill on a short-term basis. But I just don't think it would be fair to an individual to create the expectation that they have this new full-time position, and this is what it's going to be, knowing full well that it could very well change significantly when we get through this process.
Yeah, so let me ask you the question directly. How long, in practical terms, would it take you to get your organizational review done so that we're in a position to hire? Because if you say I can get it all done by the 15th of January, I come to a different conclusion on a temporary staff than if you tell me it's the 15th of April. That's,
So I think, as I noted, it is on our 2020 work plan. So my intention is to get something back to council by the end of the year. Certainly, we are in some of it's not just the building and planning department; it's the whole organization. So, and I don't like looking at departments in isolation, because I think then you miss things, because we may need to be looking at our organizational structure across the board. We are waiting for some more reports coming back through the Municipal Modernization Fund, which obviously, again, was delayed because of COVID. So I think our deadline on those now is November. So that impacts some of the other departments as well. But those are still the timelines that I'm working with. And certainly we can prioritize the building and planning department, but I do not want to do it solely in isolation of everything else, because we just don't want to.
okay, so what you're
miss.
saying is that you can provide council with your organizational recommendations in this calendar year, and that you would then be able to hire the additional staffs, depending on what you find, in January of 2021.
That is my goal. Yes. So you might not be hiring in January. You would be beginning your process, though.
You would put ads out or
Yeah.
whatever you do. So colleagues, I put that to you is because I know we're all anxious to have this happen. So getting the organizational, the recommendation on how to organize planning and building in December, I'll say, and starting the hiring process in January, is that sufficient, or do you want to do it faster than that? Well, you all went up. I saw Jerry first, then
I don't
Sarah-
think Speedy Gonzalez could do it any faster than that. By the time you finish the org review, it's into October now, call it. We're doing the hiring or the,
So you're for December and then starting the
it's not-
hiring in January.
by the sounds of it, we're not doing an internal posting, so it's just going to fire out to the great big world, right?
Who did I say next? Go ahead, Cherry.
So that means that the potential new hire or hires would be starting sometime in March, because they would have to give notice. Positions such as this might be working somewhere else.
Sure. You're going through a recruitment process. So we could, and it doesn't matter when we start, we could start a recruitment process and you might not find anybody in your first round. So you're going out again. And then depending on what the individual's doing, for sure.
Or you can get fortunate.
For sure.
You just finished a hire in that department that went relatively quickly.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, maybe headhunter.
They're
I
expensive.
think it depends on the type of position
That's
that you're
true.
looking for. Yeah.
Donna?
Yes. I would like to be sooner, but I can see that with all the issues that are involved, that's probably the best that the staff can do. I just want to say that no matter who we hire or when we hire, we'll never get another Rob, because I've had him drop things, some big things, twice this summer to go and do some very specific interventions. And he really is busy, and I really worry about him. There you go. I lose sleep over it.
And I believe that's shared by everybody. So here, I've got a suggested motion for this. So one, that the CAO provide the organizational reviews in general, if possible, but specifically on building and planning by December of 2020. Two, that based on the organizational review, that we begin a hiring process for position, and in brackets with an S, because there may be more than one. We know there's at least one, but there may be more than one positions by January, with an aim to hire as soon as possible. And 3, that the treasurer be directed to include the necessary budget for the increased complement in the 2021 budget, because we're going to need to pay for this person. Well, we want to do it out of reserves for the first year is what the consultant suggested. Okay? Is that everybody? Is that Dennis?
So I think, and the other point we did try to make was, we, in terms of using the building reserve, we do need to ensure that what we're taking out of that reserve is related to building activities, not planning activities. So if a position is 50-50 building planning, then only 50% of that can be charged to your building department.
To
Because
the degree that the statutory regulations allow us.
exactly, yeah.
Right? Everybody's comfortable with that? Okay. Moved by Sherry? No? Donna? Okay, Anita, Donna, second. All those in favor? Sherry. Okay, that takes us to the customer service recommendation. So we've been at this an hour and 33 minutes. Does anybody want a 5-minute break? I think we do. Okay, we will reassemble in 5 minutes, colleagues. Thank you. Well, it's a good time for a break. First pitch right now.
Twins are tied 1-1-7.
Yeah, but I don't think it's till 8 o'clock or something. We'll be, hopefully we're done by then. Yeah, when you're walking around, you are. Okay, colleagues, we're back live. So our next section is recommendations 10 and 11, one of which is customer service training and the other is frontline staff performance reviews. The recommendation is that we will put in place customer training. And I think the second comment is that we are already doing the staff performance items. That's what was there. And let's see, who went, Donna, you should go first this time. If anybody else is ready, they can go.
Oh, I think I'm ready.
Okay.
It's difficult for us to comment on staff performance appraisals or reviews because we don't get involved with that. So I'm not really sure. We don't know what happens after that. There is a review. It's to go in the file, I think. And I can see that from some of the comments that I've heard, enhanced customer service training should be delivered to some of the employees if the stories I hear are true. I always have to, take some of the comments with a grain of salt. Anyway, I find this one difficult to have a comment on.
Okay, fair enough. Jerry?
Thank you, through you. Customer service. Believe it or not, with my charming personality, I've been in the customer service business since I was 15. I haven't been punched out yet. But I have a problem, and I've said it before about customer services. I don't know how you train that. You get that at home when you're a kid. So you're either a good person or you're not a good person. So we want to go for customer training, or customer service training. I'd like to know a real world example of in a course. Just give me one example of something they teach you at a training seminar for customer service. Just one. Just so I can get a feel for what they're doing.
Sure. They may, a big part would be how to deal with a difficult person, right? So what are techniques to use when you have somebody facing you that's really upset? Right? So you listen, you might repeat what they're telling you. So you get trained on how to deal with that particular
Basically,
issue.
life
Right?
experience.
Yeah, they just give you tools, right?
Okay.
You know.
So then, so that's fine. Thanks for that, because I've never really understood what customer training is, or customer service training. So one of the issues I'm hearing right now is that they can't get through to anybody. They have to leave a message, and not just due to COVID, just in general. They leave a message for somebody, and it might be 3 or 4 hours or 5 hours before they get back to them. They always get back to them, but not necessarily as fast as they need. So it might be a simple question that they just need a little bit of clarification on. Nothing that requires them to pull the file. Just, hey, I need this. You guys know the rules. Just, can I do this? And then they can continue on with their day. What some townships have done is provide the cell phone numbers of their building staff. What are your thoughts on that? That way they can call for the easy questions. I get it. Some are going to abuse that and it's going to drive you nuts. But for the little questions, thoughts? And again, that speaks to the customer service that we can maintain, or in a timely manner, help our building professionals out.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I guess I'd have to put some real thought into that. I mean, it's just not been our practice, right? So we try to get people to, if they've got, we give them a clear sense of what we expect of them when it comes to, say, booking an inspection. Typically, I guess until recently, we've had live answer, although, and typically people chase the responses down. So I think this is maybe just a bit of a hiccup. But if we were to get into a circumstance where, people can call a cell phone, I guess I'd want to understand the implications of that, right? Totally before I kind of commit to it. But
Because it's an easy out too, right? Somebody calls and say, hey, I need to know, but hey, I've got to get the file in front of me before I can answer that question.
Mhm.
Or somebody says, can my light plug be 10 inches down rather than a foot? No, it's got to be a foot. Okay, thanks. Click. you know, so that there's an easy out in that respect. So that's sort of my thinking on that is, again, we're talking about customer service, and it might be good. So something to maybe.
Something to think
something
about.
to chew on.
Sure. Yep.
And if we do end up doing this customer service training, or life experience, as I call it, I'd like to see that done no later than Q2 of 2021.
Okay, Sherry.
Thank you, through you. I think new hires should be interviewed with, to assess their customer service capability. And that can be done through some questions of the interviewer to see what kind of response would be given. That's just basic. The new primer that was created by the consultant, I think, should be used with the public, highlighting areas applicable to the applicants. So if someone's coming in for minor variance, there's a big section on that that can be highlighted and say, okay, this is what you have to keep, that you should focus on. Because that primer, I don't know if you've had a chance to have a look at it, but it's an excellent document, and it could be used for anybody that's making an application that's new to the system, the first timers, if you will. I think for training, I know you don't want to hear this, but Lean Six Sigma is more customer centric than a lot of them. And training for staff would allow for each to identify ways to make improvements in their processes with a focus on the customer. And there is one that exists for building and planning processes. So that's my comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anita.
I like that idea. My comments were along the lines of new hires. I think then that there's other tools that are available for, figuring out different personalities, whether a person's introverted or extroverted, how they handle conflict, if they can handle conflict at all. Again, with the life experiences Jerry was talking about, maturity, and once again, people have different personalities. I know it gets kind of complicated and tricky, but I think a person, a new hire, needs to be able to find the right position within the organization. It's like you can't put a square peg in a round hole sort of thing. So it's a challenge. I think it's a real challenge, but I think the customer service is especially important, especially at the front desk and on answering phones.
Okay, so let me just take a stab at a possible motion because I think staff have come back. So that the 2021 budget provide for customer service training for the building and planning department staff, that it be implemented in Q1 of 2021, and that it incorporate that it incorporates proven methodologies and be targeted at the building and planning department. So proven technologies is the piece that is your piece. Yeah. And the 6.5, whatever. Yes.
Excuse me, through
Yeah,
you,
go
Mr.
ahead.
Mayor. But I still, and I do believe that we need to use this document that was created by the consultant that we paid for, because it's an
Yeah.
excellent one.
Yeah, so let's incorporate that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sorry, I'm not sure if it's just me, but I'm not clear on the recommendation.
Okay, so the recommendation is we're going to put a customer service training plan in place. It's going to be in place by Q1 of 2021.
Yeah.
It's going to be, it's going to have a target. It might be broader, but it's going to target building and planning. Okay, which you've
Right,
said
which
in
it
here.
says, yep.
That it's going to include the material that was prepared for us by the consultant, the primer, right, Sherry? This, right? And that it will draw on existing programs that have been proven to be successful in this type of training. So in other words, it's not just going to be, it's going to be it's going to incorporate, because there's customer service training platforms that exist out there as opposed to creating an in-house platform. That's, I think, what we're trying to say.
Yeah, so we would be likely looking, as was noted in the report, on a customer service training program that's developed by one of our professional associations. So yeah, we're not talking about, so it would be outsourced training that we'd be looking for. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and so Sherry's made a suggestion of one to look at, so I think we would want to look at that. But we also want to make sure that the primer that was created by our consultant, which is a very good introduction to the building and planning process, be part of that training plan, right? Yes, go ahead.
And through you, it might be beneficial to speak to some of your colleagues, Janice, other CAOs in the township, and see if there are other townships that are looking at this kind of thing, because maybe it's something that could be paid for by others that could actually access it, because one of them might be Drodum, they're going through a service delivery review, and they might be interested in that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we often share things like that if one of the municipalities is doing some sort of training. I think we'd want to offer the opportunity to all of our staff, all of our customer service staff, not just in the building and planning. Obviously, building and planning is included, but I think we'd offer the opportunity beyond that to all of our customer service staff. Lean Six Sigma is actually, it's not strictly a customer service training though. Lean Six Sigma it's a business review process. So they're really two different things. So I think if what you're trying to get, I think I just trying to confirm, but the expectation is that it would be an outsourced training program, probably through one of our professional associations, as opposed to in-house training. I think that's what you're trying to get to.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, but
Yeah.
make sure that it also includes the primer piece. that
Yeah,
was
for
done.
sure. I think there's a few things like specific to building and planning. It can include the primer and all of our own documentation that kind of in more detail sets out the processes that people have to go through. I think we'd also want to incorporate our customer service policy. I think when we get our new virtual city hall, or whatever we want to call our customer relations management program in place, training around that's going to be required as well. So I think we'd really try and be all inclusive in the training.
Okay, so maybe one of the ways to make sure that everybody's comfortable with this is, so you're going to introduce a training program. It's going to be, it's going to have third party, it's going to be a third party program. It's going to incorporate the work that was done by the consultant. It's going to be implemented in Q1, and perhaps we can say that you'll provide council with a report describing what you're going to launch by the end of December. Yes, Sherry.
And through you, I didn't speak to number 11, and I believe that the recommendations that are in the report should be incorporated into HR.
Okay, if, Janice, did you want to speak to that?
So for sure. So we do have a performance appraisal process. So that is in place, and that's part of our organizational policy that instructs us that we have one, and kind of the schedule that we do it. So that is in place. And of course, we do have in our organizational policy as well the progressive discipline procedures. They aren't specifically only related to performance appraisal, though. They're intended to be applied consistently across the corporation. And you don't wait till performance appraisal time to talk to somebody if there's an issue. They're intended to be dealt with as you go. There shouldn't be surprises as part of your performance appraisal. So I think really we have those policies and procedures already in place in existing policy.
So I think it, because if I understand the Deputy Mayor, so we talked about the pieces that I just said, and I think what Sherry wants to say, and that staff confirm that the recommendations, that the components of recommendation 12 are part of our standard operating processes. 11, sorry. Is that's what you're looking for, right? Okay,
Yeah, and I think we would have some discretion in terms of, depending on the nature of an issue. I don't want to be bound to two consecutive issues and two consecutive appraisals before taking any action. I think we need the discretion to take what action is appropriate as issues arise. This
Yeah.
to me, this recommendation
Yeah,
limits
yeah.
us as opposed to gives us more freedom.
and that's what folks are looking for, right? If there's a problem, we're going to act on it. Okay, so customer service program in the first quarter with a report to council in December describing what that will look like. Everybody okay with that? Anybody want to move that? Jerry, I need a second. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we are into number 12, which is the annual stakeholders feedback survey working session. And I think the staff have said, yeah, we can do that. So when I got to get my thing here, who wants to go first? Anita, why don't you go first on this one?
I'll just make it short and sweet. I just think it's a good idea. The annual survey is a great idea. People love to fill out surveys.
Okay, so Sherry.
We need a mechanism where people can comment on their experience, and it's the only way to find out if tweaking is necessary. There was no timeline that was provided in that, was there?
Q4 of 2021.
That was for the open house
Oh, for
event.
the open house, but not for the survey.
Yeah.
You're right. Do you want to suggest a date?
Um,
Q3, Q2?
Yeah, sure.
Q2. Okay. So, sorry, Donna.
Yes, I was just thinking that I'm not really fond of the open house process unless there's a whole group component to it. I prefer the town hall way where everybody can hear what people's concerns are and internalize them rather than filling out a form and somebody analyzing the general consensus. It's a small point, but I prefer town hall format to open house format.
Okay. Harry?
My comment on that would be that we make sure the mayor is written into the verbiage of the for our recommendation there, because I do think it's important as the head of council to be part of this this process, if you will, to make sure we're there. And I don't know, or maybe the portfolio person as well. And I'll throw that out there. Mayor for sure, I think should be in the recommendation. Then I'll leave for discussion on portfolio.
Okay. So, yep. If I understood the consultant correctly, the reason why they worded the recommendation the way they did, where they said the CAO and mayor, is because they wanted, he was suggesting, he in this case, was suggesting that the feedback needs to be both at the governance level and at the operations level. So that's why I think he's recommending both the CAO and the mayor. So that's not in any way precluding the rest of council to participate in it. It's just a simplified way of saying, yep, it's going to be on the political side with mayor, and the CAO would certainly bring along, I would expect, Robert and whoever. Yes, Jenna?
Yeah, for sure. So with the open house type of event, it provides an opportunity for all members of council. So it's not restricting, it's including all of council. And of course, we're going to include relevant staff. Yeah.
So it would be a town hall as opposed to an open house, right?
Well, I guess that's the question. So with an open house, what typically the open house format is, so if we've done our customer service survey, we'd be able to present some of the results of that. You'd have some boards around, you'd have people being able to come in and out as they wish, looking at the results and talking to council members or staff who are here. If it's a town hall, typically what you've done with your town halls is you've just kind of sat around in a circle and people have been able to ask questions. So I guess you could do it
Well,
either way. The open house just
You
informally
could do a
allows people-
hybrid where you've got, your placards out and people can come in for the first half hour and just look around and leave. And then for the last hour, you actually sit down with council and staff and have a Q&A. So you can do a hybrid model of it. Because I think as council, and I tend to agree with Donna, it's getting those questions coming from you. And it can be a more satisfying experience for the ratepayer than just coming in and filling out. But there are some people that's all they'll want to do. And so if we offer a hybrid, that would work. On the customer service survey, I agree that we should do one, but is it possible to do what the consultant did in that we make sure that a customer service survey goes to everybody that engaged building and planning in the previous year?
That's what the recommendation says, that it would provide for specific outreach to those who have been party to the building and or planning application processes. So I want to do a customer service survey that covers all of our operations, but in addition, specifically for building and planning, there would be outreach to anybody who's involved in those processes throughout the year.
Okay, I missed that. So then the recommendation, just to do this, we'll do a customer service survey in 2021 in Q2. That as a component of the customer service survey, we will survey all individuals who utilized the building and planning department in the previous year, right? At 3, that we will hold a hybrid open house town hall meeting in Q3 of 2021, hosted by council and the administration, as opposed to mayor and CEO.
I'm just wondering if you give us a little bit more flexibility in terms of timing for the survey. If we can run the survey a little bit longer into Q3 and then have the open house, it just gives a larger time period for people who have been involved in the processes.
So you want to say starts in Q2 for how many weeks do you want to run a survey?
Well, I think we ran it probably, if I remember correctly, 5 months or 6 months
Ooh,
last
that's a
time.
little
It was
long.
April. Yeah, it was April through into the, yeah.
5 months just seems like an awful long time to be running a survey, but because it's more than a survey. Well, it's just sort of a page that you go to. Why don't we say that runs in May and June, and then you can take the results from that and organize the town hall in September type of thing. Does that work? Yeah, Anita?
I think we have to keep in mind that the active building season runs pretty much from May to October or so. So if you're only going to run it May and June, a lot of the active building is still coming into the summer months as well. So as Janice was saying, to have this open house town hall hybrid early in Q4, it could be October, right? And so run the survey maybe until sort of during the beginning of some of the busier months, so that to get an accurate representation of how people are feeling that they're being treated.
Okay, so run the survey June, July, and August. Do the town hall in October. Everybody comfortable with that? Okay, with all the other things I said previously. Okay. So we have a customer survey. We got it focused at building and planning. We're going to do it June, July, and August. And we're going to do the town hall / open house in October, and we'll have both council and members of staff there. Everybody comfortable with that? I need a mover. Anita, need a second. Jerry, all those in favor? Good, we're done with 12. On to 13, 10-day time frame for residential permit applications. So the staff is saying that if we are doing it within 5 days and that the permit tracking software will be, KPI will be set at 5 days, if I understand what you're saying, right?
That's right. We'd calibrate the system to include that KPI. Yeah.
So essentially, you're saying 5 days works, and we will measure it. Does anybody want to intervene on that one, or just, are we comfortable and accept? Thank you. And Anita seconds it. All those in favor? Good, 13 is done. And we're on to 14 and 15, which is on the pre-consultation issues. And if, essentially, the consultant on pre-consultation is saying the pre-consultation should be formalized with an actual agreement between the parties, which I think staff have said they're willing to do, or not of course willing to do. They see it as a good idea. The consultant asked for some particular components in that agreement where it talks about the kinds of reports you could be expected to have to come up with, some sort of estimate on fees and other costs and deposits, so that to the best of your ability, all of it, of course, has got to be into some sort of language that estimates are estimates. They're not absolutes. And the other piece was is how we can convince on minor variances, how we can convince people to engage in pre-consultation. We don't have the power of the act. It doesn't, whereas we do in the others. But if I did a scan of several jurisdictions today, and they've all come up with some pretty interesting words where they make it pretty clear to anybody getting a minor variance, you're to do this. They're very careful not to say you have to, because you can't do it, but they're pretty clear that that's what you want to do. So that's, I think I've captured what's going on here. And so either to Robert or Janice, on the issue of the agreement, which I think you're comfortable doing, are you able to put in there your estimates on what kind of reports you're going to need? This is the agreement. I know your pre-consultation checklist already has that, but in the actual agreement, are you comfortable incorporating all those things?
Yeah, for sure. We wouldn't want to lose the guidance that it's given currently in our document. So typically, shortly after we have the pre-consultation, the applicant and or their agents are provided with a summary of what we discussed, and it includes a very clear list of reports that might be provided or might be required or will be required, and an estimate of fees, things of that nature. So we wouldn't want to lose that aspect of the application. But beyond that, we could add some additional language as it relates to obligations and what might happen should they fail to meet their obligations, right? And would set the timeframes that we're going to meet as well, right? So it'll just be that much clearer, I guess, for applicants who, and it happens occasionally where they're excited about making an application early on, and we get a partial application and it sits for a while. Well, this agreement will say, look, if it sits for too long, then we're just going to return your stuff, right? So that kind of stuff, I guess, just to be more specific about what everybody who's part of the process, what everybody's obligations are. And the intent would be that they would actually sign it and send it back so that they acknowledge, right, that this is part of the process.
And if I understand your report, you're suggesting that you would implement that before the end of this year.
Yeah, Jeanette's been working on it already. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Sherry.
Move it as written to work with the county with the recommendation.
Say that again. Sorry.
Move it as written, the recommendation, and to work with the county.
And for their part of it, right?
Yes.
Okay. And Jerry's seconding that. Just before we vote on that, can I ask a question? How many people do actually do a pre-consultation on a minor variance?
Oh, the majority of them do for sure. Yeah. And that may just be, oftentimes it's it's somebody comes to the counter and they're asking about what the process is, and we'll meet with them at that point. And then when they get something a bit more solid, Jeanette will sit down with them and make sure that their application is complete, and she'll ask them questions. So the majority of them do, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so the ones that do, would they be covered by Sherry's motion? You would do the contract with, or the agreement with them too?
Yeah, so I guess that's something that we could consider. And so that, I mean, the complexity of a variance is, I mean, there's very few variance applications that require some additional support material other than a decent site plan. So it's just not as comprehensive, right? But we
So
do.
you
certainly
don't
want-
think it's necessary
I
at
don't.
that
I don't
level?
think it's not as necessary as it would be for the larger applications. For sure.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a seconder. All those in favor? Carry. Okay, we'll go on to recommendation 16, which is site plan variable standards, which is an issue that has bedeviled us for quite some time. So why don't we go to staff on this? We'll start with Anita. This is recommendation 16, where we have variable standards for site plans depending on whether you're in an urban or rural area, or whether you're in a growth or non-growth area. Okay. Donna, do you want to do that first?
Sure. It's been a long-standing concern or issue with me that pretty much, and this is a small part of it, I know, but pretty much every development that would occur would need paved parking. And there have been several issues brought up with different site plans that I didn't feel that paving parking was the way to go. And I think we actually did get planning staff to say once that it was a discretionary issue. So I really think that I know that every rural development is not the same, but I think we do really need some specific language in there about the parts that are discretionary or could be discretionary and the parts of the site plan that are not.
Okay. Jerry?
Thank you, through you. We all know about the paving issues, and I mean, council has fought back. And I think everybody, I guess, building planning department knows where we stand on paving on a lot of the issues with the rural. I think it's a great recommendation to separate those things out because they are completely different. I guess the question regarding urban versus rural, and we may not have any jurisdiction over it all, Rob, but what about, so we can decide on paving, but can we decide on, say, stormwater management? Is that something in our purview as well, or no?
No.
Nope. Okay. So I think it's important then that we do make sure that we've got the language in there that we do have some discretion.
Sherry?
I think we should, I move the recommendation that a written policy to council for approval by the end of the first quarter 2021 and approve the recommendation as written, which that was the timeline that was in the recommendation.
Yeah, so Anita, go ahead.
How does this particular recommendation fit in with the growth plan? Because it talks to set out growth and non-growth catchment areas for site plan approvals. How does the growth plan fit into this particular recommendation, or does it?
No, the growth plan really wouldn't come into place, other than it does provide some outlines of what are growth and non-growth areas. So I think what we're trying to make a distinction here. And it was part of the recommendation made by Performance Concepts, talked about delineating on a geographically, right, on a map. And what we're saying is that gives us certainly some guidance, right, as to what where we would apply different policies. But we wanted some additional flexibility and language within the policy that we'll put together that allows us to, to require, some urban components to design if it's warranted, right? And an example would be, say, the timber mart, right? So, that's an, it's in a rural area, but it wouldn't make sense to develop that without, some urban components to it, like paved parking, something like that. So we're saying let's not draw a hard line, but let's put some framework around when we apply some more lenient policies and what those policies look like, right? And how.
So you're not suggesting to designate specific areas, so there wouldn't be maps that come with your report?
I'm not saying they wouldn't be. I'm saying that they wouldn't be the only thing that would be part of the determining whether or not we apply a particular policy, right? I'm saying there are instances where it's appropriate, right, to ask for.
Okay, because I think the challenge right now, if I just to put it out there, is the default position, and I'm just going to take paving as an example. The default position is pave it. And I think what we're trying to get to is that the default position in certain places would be don't pave it. And you're saying, yes, that's good, but there may be the odd exception where you would. So we're turning it around. The default position is no paving. As an exception, you may have to do it, which is very different from what we're doing now. So long as that's the thrust of the recommendation that is going to come back, that Sherry has asked as a motion, then I'm comfortable with it. But it's got to be that in the rural areas, the non-urban areas, the default position is no paving.
Okay, that's the guidance I've gotten, and I'll make sure that the guidance.
Well, I want to make sure I'm speaking for council.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay, so Sherry has moved that comes back in a report in the first quarter of 2021. Donna has seconded. All those in favor? Good. Okay, we are off to number 17, delegated authority on subdivision approvals. And so the consultant has said, and I'm paraphrasing now, the consultant has said, you do most of the work of the township anyways, and therefore you might as well have the authority. The report from staff says, yeah, we don't think that's true. We think most of the work is happening up at the county, and we don't have the resources to do it at our level. So there's a factual disagreement between the consultant's observation and staff's observation. So I don't know whether Janice or Rob or both want to speak to that, because as a council, we're getting two different pieces of information that are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a couple of issues at play. One is their stated goal is to try to streamline the process and to reduce double governance, right? And based on the vast majority of the applications we received, there would be two bodies that will decide on whether or not it's appropriate to develop the property. The county will always be involved in official plan amendments, and the vast majority of our applications include official plan amendments. So, and as council is aware, when we do a draft plan of subdivision, we go to the public with a complete application, and we consider all three applications typically concurrently, right? So zoning, official plan, and draft plan of subdivision. So there's really no time savings, right, for the vast majority of applications. So that's one thing. So the goal just won't be achieved, even if we go to the extent and expense of what I think it would cost to get to the level of capacity that we would need, right, to deliver what the county is currently delivering, right? And so the point I make in the report is that they've developed expertise. They've got more experience certainly dealing with these types of applications, and they've developed peer review agreements with other professionals that account for the fact that they have more work to do. So consequently, they would get I think a favorable pricing certainly than we would, right? So I have a pretty good understanding of the process, the way it works today. We have a very good relationship with county staff. The files really do not sit on county or township staff's desks for very long. We make our business of responding quickly, as does the county, and it's just a fairly lengthy process And that's just the unfortunate aspect of it. There's a lot of professional involvement, and the professionals don't always agree. There's always back and forth. And that's what takes the time, right? Is the back and forth between professionals. But I guess based on my experience, I just didn't see that the effort that we would have to undertake to get to where we could effectively deliver the service the way the county does would be money or time well spent, and it just wouldn't achieve the goal that's being stated here, which is to reduce double governance, right?
How many plans of subdivision do we do in a year?
We wouldn't do one every year, right? So we made, I think we'll do one next year, right? If with Triple T, but that'll be one for next year, right? So we just don't do a lot, right?
Sherry, did you?
I have a question through you. So has the county ever changed a plan of subdivision that we've presented?
Well, I would say no. I mean, there's always, the original submission made by the applicants is rarely the final outcome because there's a whole host of people that get a chance to kick at the can, right? And there could be a whole host of reasons why it gets changed, and the county may be part of why it gets changed. Maybe there's a traffic issue, but then, the Conservation Authority gets their thoughts considered as well as it relates to stormwater management and other things. So, it's not as though they don't have an impact on the form of development, but it's always based on a sound technical reason, right? Why it should be changed, right? Or amended.
So my next question is, does the county do the peer review or do we?
So for draft plans of subdivision, they hire the peer review consultants to look after matters related to traffic. The Conservation Authority does stormwater management. The county also looks at stormwater management, but more as just a quantity aspect, not so much quality water. And we do our own review based on the implications to our utilities, right? So water and sewer and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So I guess the answer is we're all kind of involved in reviewing it, but the bigger picture peer reviews are done at the county level. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sherry, did you want to? Anita?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I seem to recall a similar discussion to this came up a number of years ago. And I think at the time there was whether it was a ratepayer had made the suggestion, I can't remember the details, but I seem to recall that basically the discussion ended that in order for our township to actually take this path or go down this path and to hire the expertise required that is currently at the county level, it would actually not be cost effective to go what the suggestion is with regards to kind of taking over a lot of these tasks ourselves.
Donna, did you want to take this one? Okay. Can I make a suggestion? And Sherry and I are privy to this, and it is public. So the county is looking at an initiative. I think, Janice, that you've been talked to about this as well, to have a discussion between the county and the lower tiers about the planning process. I think that's, yeah. And so I think our recommendation would be to refer this particular issue to that discussion. So there's going to be a discussion that's going to take place. It's coming out of both the service delivery review and the warden mayor's task force that we need to have this discussion. So if we could just move that this particular item be part of that discussion, and that we'll be informed about how we want to go forward based on that discussion. Moved by Sherry, seconded by Donna. All those in favor? Great. Okay, we're off to 18, which is 18 and 19 are really the same process, but or the same concept on two different processes, and that is doing something concurrent and not sequential. So the first one is minor variances and when you're allowed to do a building permit, and the second one is site plans and when you want to do a building permit. So who wants to start off on that one? Jerry, you want?
Sure, I've got good.
Yeah, you can, I think we can do 18 and 19 at the same time because it's basically the same, it's the same issue with two different, Go ahead, Jerry.
I've just got my notes here. I'm fine with that as it is.
so you're fine with that? Okay. You're fine with that? Yeah, that's on mine as well. My view is that we get it in place for January 1st.
Yeah. 2021, 2021.
2021, not 2022, like 3 months from now. Donna?
I'm fine with it as written.
Yeah, so, and I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. So let's take a minor variance as an example. So somebody's in here, we approve a minor variance. The difference that's going to happen now, if somebody wants to come in and apply for a building permit, they can, but we don't really look at it until the 20-day period. That's when it goes in the queue, right? Is at the end of 20 days. Now what you're saying is, no, we're going to let you know that there's a chance you're doing all this work for nothing, because if it gets denied on appeal, that's not on us. That's your issue. But we will now accept them and we will go through the process and we will get that done within 10 days. So if you get a minor variance approval and you apply for a building permit, let's say you do it the next day, you will be able to get your building permit 3 days after the appeal period ends, because you will have gone through your 10 days. If you wait till day 17 to file for your building permit, it'll be 7 days after the appeal period ends. That's essentially what you're doing. So you can get, even if you get your 10 days over with inside the appeal period, you're still going to wait 3 days once the appeal period ends, or up to 3 days. You may do it the same day. Okay. And the same thing is on the site plans as well.
Yeah, and with the site plans, it may be longer because of some of them are longer duration timeframes to review, but. Yeah.
Okay. And we're going to do that for January 1st, 2020. So that's a major
2021.
2021. Yeah. But we could try to do it for January 1st, 2020, but that wouldn't work. Okay. That's been moved by Sherry, I think, right? And seconded by Anita. All those in favor? Okay. So that takes care of both 18 and 19.
And we can do 20, 21, 22.
We did 20, 21, 22. I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, that we did all of that 20, 21, 22 as part of our discussion on number 5, because this is about the specific things we want the product to do, if I understand correctly. And we've said staff are coming back with a report on what the product will do, the cloud, whatever.
And it would be implemented by the end of 2020. Didn't we say that?
Whatever we said, what if on number 5, what was the time frame? Yeah. Okay. So that covers 20, 21, 22, because it's basically the same thing. So that's why I skipped that. I'm sorry. So that takes us then to 23, 24. Well, we're doing, 23 is, we'll do a separate time frame. Time frame processing target should be informed by Bill 108. Appeal timeframes for core planning application quarter. The staff continue to respond to applications in a timely manner consistent with the relevant time plan. So if I understand correctly, the consultant said you need to adopt to 108 timeframes, and staff is coming back and saying we do 108 timeframes. Am I reading that right, or have I missed something?
Yeah, that's always part of our review equation, right? Yeah.
So we are hitting the 108 timeframes.
Well, so Jeanette's talked about some of them are wholly within our control, right? So when we get a completed application, we've got 30 days to provide them with input. After that, so there's some debate back and forth, and there may be a 90-day or 120-day turnaround time frame. But I think what's been noted actually in performance concepts KPIs is that we have to account for the days that we're accountable for, right? So once we made our review and we provided the applicant with our comments, I mean, those days we shouldn't be accountable for, right? Because they're not in our court anymore. So I guess what I'm saying is we're cognizant of the timeframes that are spoken to in the Planning Act, and we're always mindful of those as we do our work, right? And Jeanette's kind of outlined, this is part of the piece that she provided. She's kind of outlined the process that we follow when it comes to the guidance that we give to our peer review consultants and to the county and to ORCA, who are tasked with responding to our requests for their input. Again, but we can't be accountable for the length of time that it takes, say, ORCA or the county to provide input. But I guess what we're stating is that, essentially, performance concept is saying we should be mindful of those times frames, and I'm telling you that it certainly informs how we perform the duty, right?
Okay, the reason why I'm asking is, and I think I remember this, but I may have got it wrong, that when Bill 108 first came out and we had a discussion at a council meeting, it was part of a correspondence, and I pulled it out and asked the question. And I think the response back was that the 108 timeframes were unrealistic in what they were requiring to do. They were placing a new burden on us in terms of the time frame, because they're tighter timeframes than what existed beforehand. And I thought I understood at the time that it was going to be a real challenge for us to meet those timelines. And that's why I'm asking the questions, because the consultant came back and said, no, you better meet those 108 timelines. And you're saying, yes, we will. But I thought I had remembered previously, and I'm not being judgmental about this, I just thought I had heard that those were not realistic for us.
Yeah, and the reason, I guess the reason they're not is because we just don't have total control over the length of time it takes to get through the process, right? It's really incumbent on the applicant to be responsive, right, to the input that we provide, as part of a larger application. And so, I guess the end result is very, very few applicants take issue with the notion that it's taking more than 120 days or 180 days, because oftentimes it's because they're failing, right, to provide the supporting information that we need to make a decision, right? So it would be fruitless for them to go to make an appeal to LPAT on our indecision if the reason for our indecision is because they haven't provided the kind of information we need to make our decision. Yeah.
Would it be possible to provide counsel in the same report that you provide the number of building permits and the number of, you provide a whole bunch of statistical information when I think we do our quarterly work plans, to say, okay, we handled X number of applications, and of those applications, 88% were done within the 108 guidelines, and X% were outside of them. Is that a feasible thing to do? So at least we're monitoring how we're doing against that.
Yeah, we would certainly have that information in the file, right, in the system. So yeah, it's something that we could provide with.
And once we get it automated, it's probably really easy to do. Yeah. So why don't, if counselors are okay, and if somebody wants to move that we get a quarterly report on our performance against 108 guidelines. Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay. Somebody Donna will move that, and Jerry will second it. All those in favor. Okay, that takes us to 24 and 25, which is this is about implementing the KPIs within our automated system. Okay, and we've committed to do that, and we'll do it. And so, okay, and Anita has seconded it. All those in favor? Okay, good. That ends that. I have one other item that I want to bring up that does with this. So first of all, thanks to all of council and staff. This has taken 2.5 hours, but I believe it has been very productive on it. So the key here is going to be follow-up. The deputy mayor, I think, came up with a really great idea. We're stealing it from somebody else, but that's what great ideas are all about, is that we use a dashboard type of system. And I think that's a good idea. Lots of organizations use it. And so that's the first part of it. I think I want to actually, I think Sherry may be willing to move it, that we use that as a measurement. We then, I think, wanted to have an opportunity as a council to monitor that dashboard on a regular basis. And so my first inclination is that we come together as a council on a monthly basis to review the dashboard, and then to take to understand that, yeah, we're on track, or no, we're not on track, and find out why, because there are reasons why we may not be, and then suggest remedial action. Now, so we can do that as a committee of council to come back once a month and do that, which is my preference, by the way, or we can do it as part of our regular council meetings. And the reason why I'm somewhat reluctant in regular council meetings is because sometimes, through no fault, and this is not staff's fault in any way, it just happens, that you've got an agenda that's a mile long, and adding one more thing onto it becomes very, very challenging. And so whether we do it by way of a special meeting and saying, okay, we're going to have a special meeting to review the dashboard is a way to do it, or we can simply say we have a committee of council that does it and they meet once a month. I'm not, the actual form isn't the most important thing to me, but what I want, or what I think we need, is a dashboard, and that we review it as a council monthly. Okay, whether we do it, my inclination is to want to do it as a separate meeting, because I know then it'll get the attention it deserves. If council feels that's another meeting and that's onerous, we could always do it as part of council. I throw that out. I'm happy to hear ideas. Yes, Donna.
Yes, through you. I'd just like to check with, I guess, Janice, to see if she thought that there would be enough information on a monthly basis. It might be maybe every 2 months. I'm thinking monthly there might not be enough to warrant gathering together for a meeting every month.
Yeah, I think for sure you'd find that there'd be some periods of time where there isn't a lot of, we may be making progress working behind the scenes, but there isn't really a lot of, we're in between milestones. A lot of these things, once they're done, they're done. So what you might want to do, if you want, creating a dashboard is fine. I think it will look a little bit different than what the county did. It's a little busy. Ours will hopefully be a little bit less busy. But again, to just to kind of keep us on track and make sure we're working our way through, maybe you might want to start having it as a report on the council agenda. And that way, when there's not a whole lot of activity going on or a lot to update because things are getting done, then it's easy to go through. Or if there is something more meaty on there to talk about, you could pull it out and talk about it. And if we found that there wasn't enough time as part of regular council as we go through this, then you could always make a decision to create a different forum to do it. But through the council agenda might work nicely, I would think, given.
Thank you, through you. My 2 cents, as I stated before today, this is our second biggest revenue source. So I think it's important that we get it right. I think we made some great progress today. I think we know which direction we want to head. My suggestion would be, to Andy's point, have a separate meeting. That way, who knows what happens at these things. I don't know how many times I said I'll be home at 6 and it's 7:30, 8 o'clock, right? And then you want to tack another meeting on. And I would suggest monthly right now. And if we find we don't need, because of stuff that's upcoming and the low hanging fruit's done, if we find as we progress it's every 2 months, or there's nothing going to happen for a month and a half, then we can adjust. But I'd like to see monthly at the beginning, just because we got to get this thing going, and there's a lot of balls in the air right now with all these recommendations that I think we need to be on top of. That's my thoughts.
Donna, you're okay with that? Okay, so we'll start. So we'll start it with a separate meeting. If we find that it's it's unnecessary or that it's better, we can always put it back in a council meeting. So we'll start off with a special meeting of council in November to deal specifically with the dashboard's first report. We'll do that, and then we can decide whether that's the route we want to go or if we want to do it some other way. Is council comfortable with that? Okay, so why don't we do that? And maybe the clerk could circulate a survey monkey type thing to council to find out a good time to do that. Because I'm cognizant that Anita's not always available during the day. 3:30 is a good time. Yeah, I
6 weeks left. I don't care.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Where that gets into problems, if you're doing it in advance, then you have a committee of adjustment, then you have a long council meeting. I'm not going to speak for my colleagues, but for me, I'm pretty well toast by that can be a long day. Let's just see if we can survey monkey a time in that first week of November for a 3:30 meeting, and it might not take that long. Okay. I got to turn on my machine. Yeah. Tuesday at 3:30? That would be November the 3rd. Anita? Okay. If you could send out a meeting notice tomorrow, that'd be great. Okay, we need a motion that there'll be a special meeting of council on November the 3rd to review the dashboard. And that's moved by Sherry, seconded by Anita. All those in favor, carried. That concludes our business. We have a I don't know what. No, it's okay. Oh, no. She was just, yeah, we need a confirming by. Okay, so this is how I read it, and I'll let the clerk guide me. The recommendation that's actually in the report is mute. What we've done is passed a whole series of recommendations which replace that. So we're not voting in any way on the recommendation that was in the written report. We replaced it with everything that we've done in the last 2.5 hours. What we do need, though, is a confirming bylaw, which is moved by Anita and seconded by Donna. All those in favor? Okay. And then a motion to adjourn by Jerry, seconded by Donna. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Great piece of work, colleagues, and thank you to staff. Great piece of work as well. Appreciate that. And we are 2 hours and 40 minutes. That's not too bad. So are we going to turn off the feed? I think it's